how do we make it productive, not burn you out, not burn your assistants out, yet still at the end of the day be able to run a business, right? And be profitable. So it does take some open communication, and it does take sometimes some creative thinking and just realizing you use your team in a completely different way.
Is your schedule wearing you out and still not letting you give patients the kind of care you know they deserve? In this episode, I'm talking with Ashley Whinery, an experienced practice manager who isn't afraid to call out the see more, then we double book more mindset that so many offices slide into. She shows how a smarter, calmer schedule can actually boost patient satisfaction, protect your team from burnout, and make the whole practice more sustainable. Ashley breaks down how she structures the day so it actually works in real life. Bigger, more demanding procedures in the morning, lighter appointments after lunch, and built-in room for true emergencies so they don't derail everything. She also gets into the thoughtful side of scheduling, how to pre-screen for the right patients, set expectations clearly from the start, and use tools like Dentrix Ascend to support communication and efficiency without letting tech replace real human connection. So, if you ever looked at your day and thought, this pace is not sustainable, then this conversation will help you rethink how you schedule. Let's dive into how a patient-focused schedule can change your practice and your peace of mind. All righty, Ashley. So talk to us. What's one piece of advice you can give us this morning?
I would say this sounds very untraditional, but do not double book your doctors or triple book your doctors.
Interesting. Why?
It leads to burnout for your provider, first of all. The biggest goal, I would say, is you want quality patients versus quantity of patients. Having a doctor of 3 patients in 3 different rooms, right? Multiple assistants, your doctor's getting very minimal time with them. They're not being able to give them that full care in a world of technology and AI and the way insurance goes. It's all about how quick you can get a patient in and out, right, to get that return on the investment. But believe it or not all patients want that. They want to feel heard. They want to feel like they are your one and only patient. We all know that's not true, right? We have to have multiple patients to run a business, but we can still give them that feel. So we utilize our assistants, just a little different, of course, because they're not running their own room. But it just goes back to that care for your patients, that patient feeling trusted in you. They want to spend the time and the money with you. They're going to refer friends and family, a coworker, somebody at a restaurant and is talking, I got this too. They're going to talk and they're going to give your name out. And those referrals are much more than a referral in the newspaper that says, hey, come in and we're going to give you $10 off.
Gotcha. So then what made you realize that fast and productive weren't always the same thing in dentistry?
Yeah. So, and it doesn't happen all the time, right? But sometimes when we're fast, you're listening into the room next door because doctor's in with this assistant, but this assistant's talking. So you're kind of getting bits and pieces. You're not fully hearing what that patient says. Then that patient's frustrated and they don't want to pay a bill, or they don't feel like they got the care they needed, or you told me I needed a filling, but now we're at a core buildup and moving into a crown. Like that communication gap kind of starts, along with if we're doing a fast crown prep, there's times maybe the margins aren't what they should be, and we didn't take the time to refine those like they should. So now in our seat appointment, either one, they don't seat, or 2, it takes some coaxing to get that in. So you're upping your chair time there. We're sending it back to the lab. There may be an incurred fee or extra time, all of those things where it's, if you just slow it down a little bit, we get it done right the first time. We've listened to that patient fully. It just flows a little better, I feel.
Yeah. Is there such thing as too slow?
I would say yes. You really have to hone in on what that procedure takes the doctor to do. What is still profitable? So there's more to that. You have to figure out what your chair overhead is. You got to figure out your assistant pay, and then what it takes to flip a room financially, and lab bills or whatever may be incurred in that procedure. And then you have to kind of balance off of that. So do I think you should have a 2-hour just standard prophy? No, right? But you're never going to get a 30-minute prophy in our office either. So there's that balance there, and it's going to take some digging into it and some time. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's a harsh realization of what it truly takes financially to run an operatory. And it may not be the same for every provider, right? One provider, it may be different just given if they're a specialist, or maybe their crumb preps are taking them 2 hours, but this doctor's taking 3 hours, so like you do have to customize it to what works for you, but there's also going to be those limits.
Interesting. So then at the beginning, who requested this? Was it the doctor? She was more like, hey, we got to stop, chill out. Or was it you? Because most office managers are trained to fill schedules, but you're saying
Yeah.
your job is to protect the doctor's time. So what helped you shift that mindset?
So the key is to keep your schedule productive. So we have a template for my doctor's schedules. All heavy, big restorative projects are in the morning. Doctor's fresh, right? All of those things. You have time to get a lab case together out to the lab. We still use a lab with a ceramist that's handling. We don't do that in office. I don't foresee that in our future anytime soon. So like there's things like that. We want to get that into our lab as soon as possible. So we do the heavier stuff in the morning. Then in the afternoon tends to be new patients, other denture appointments, basic restorative, things of that nature where it's just a little bit easier on the doctor. And two, when you're filling schedules, your afternoon, right? If something falls out and it's a littler appointment, they're easier to fill. Your bigger appointments, you're moving things around. You now have a 3 hour gap that's tougher to fill first thing in the morning. So there's some scheduling to it that definitely you look into. The doctor really was the one, to be honest, that was like, I want to have that relationship with my patient. How do we make that work? So in order to do that, we had to sit down and say, how do we make it productive, not burn you out, not burn your assistants out, yet still at the end of the day, be able to run a business, right? And be profitable. So it does take some open communication, and it does take sometimes some creative thinking and just realizing you use your team in a completely different way.
Interesting. So let's dive into that a little bit right now on how you're using your team. But before we do, how do you decide what not to book, even when the schedule looks empty?
So that's where things get tricky. So with our prosthodontist, she does book out, gain out about 5 months in advance. Our general dentist is booking about 8 weeks. So if something cancels and you have that last minute opening, the front staff, that is the one that kind of fills schedules. They're the first line of defense. The first thing they look at is our production. What is in that day? You never want a day of no production, even though they might be easier appointments, right? But you still need some production. So that day, the rest of it's maybe new patient and a basic filling, things like that, but you have an opportunity to get a crown in, that's going to be the first thing we look to try to move forward. If the day's flipped and it's very restorative heavy, then I always encourage them, like, let's put something easier in for the doctor. Maybe it's an insert of an Essex, or maybe a new patient, right? Where they're kind of just sitting down knee to knee, talking with that patient, getting to know them. So you're going to just have to train your staff on how to keep the day productive. But again, you don't want any of your staff leaving at the end of the day feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't want to come back tomorrow because I'm so tired and I'm done.
Yeah, that's true. That's so interesting. So you're the one, Ashley, who has to train a lot of these team members on how to build this doctor-driven schedule. Have you ever
Yeah.
had to untrain your team from believing busier means better? How'd you do that?
We've gotten very blessed with the staff we've had. After COVID, there's been a lot of turnaround just in positions in general, I feel like in the dental industry. And so you're getting people that are coming from other offices, right? And we have a very different philosophy in that of not double booking our doctors and how we're filling schedules. We have been blessed that they've all been very open to hearing what we're saying and why. And they very quickly learn within, 30 to 60 days with us how it makes sense. And then their lingo starts to change of like how this is better for your patient, right? Because now you're allowing doctor more time with you. Doctor doesn't feel rushed with you. We can give you the care as if you were our aunt, uncle, brother, cousin, right?
Mhm.
And so that lingo starts to become more natural. And we've just really been blessed that way. We haven't had too much pushback, which has been great. And they actually see real quick the difference that type of scheduling makes.
Nice. So the team members see it too, right? And then they feel probably not as rushed either.
Correct. Yep. And they feel more secure, right? Because you know what's coming next. It's when this falls out, now I know how to fill it. They've got lists of things of like, okay, these are the next people I'm going to call. And usually you can call and fill pretty quickly if you kind of already know in the back of your mind who you've got out a couple weeks and that you could get in.
Interesting. Okay, I like that. So then what daily or weekly checkpoints tell you your systems are aligned with that quality over quantity philosophy?
So definitely looking at your schedules. So we have not only monthly production goals, but I break that down into weekly and daily. So with Dentrix Ascend, their report system is great. And they have something called the daily huddle. And it actually shows you like your collections, your production, what you produced yesterday, what's still on the books for this month. So it makes your tracking very easy to see, are my schedules full? Are they not just full, but are they actually productively full? So that's one way, is just seeing that schedule and seeing those numbers align. The other one I really love is when you're looking at your new patients. So a lot of offices are like, yay, we got 20 new patients last month. Sure, that's great. But you need to dive farther into those new patients, right? And you need to pull reports within those new patients. How many of those new patients have their hygiene scheduled? If they have treatment, is it scheduled? Have they left you a review once you sent it to them after they've left your building? Those are all checkpoints for your new patients of like, these are how you get a good quality new patient. You don't want that new patient that's the squeaky wheel that's like, well, you can't get me in for 2 weeks for hygiene. I want to be in tomorrow, right? Once that squeaky wheel, they're always that squeaky wheel. And what do squeaky wheels want? They want something for free. They want something now, and they're going to complain until they get it. It burns your staff out. It burns your doctors out, and it gets nobody anywhere, right? You're going to have 20 new patients in a month, but if you can get half of those to be good new patients that are getting that hygiene scheduled, that are giving you a Google referral, that are getting any treatment scheduled, those are the ones that are going to talk about you. They're going to tell friends. They're going to tell everybody. And it kind of goes back to old school ways of one bad review is toxic, right? It spreads super quick. But the good reviews take a little bit more to get out there because, they all think it's fluff and somebody fudged that. So the more you can get of those, then people start seeing you and they're like, well, actually, no, they do care about their patients. And this patient says that they treated them like they were family. And that speaks, I think, volume when you're in such a world of get in, get out, and I don't even care your first name.
Interesting. So Dentrix Ascend, you said you utilize it. It gives you all those checkpoints like, hey, did you ask for a review up for every single patient?
Absolutely. And these are things we're looking at daily. So they make it very clear, very easy. Do you have their email, right? And then there's a way, did they send you a review? Do you have their hygiene scheduled? And if you don't, we have it set where my staff has to give me a reason why they didn't schedule it. Did you not ask? Do they not want to schedule? Like, why? What is our why here? Did they need a calendar? You still get those excuses, even though everybody has digital calendars. And those you kind of know they're on the fence, right? You could possibly end up with a decent patient here. Maybe they do have a paper calendar, but this may not be one to put a ton of time into just because this might not be a fit for them and they don't know how to tell you that. So those reports are great because it makes it very simple to see that daily huddle and looking at it constantly. And again, that shows those numbers, the production numbers, what is on our books today, what we did yesterday, what is remaining for the current month we're in. And it helps you project if you are on target for those daily, weekly, and monthly production goals. So when something falls out, if I have a big case that falls out in a couple $1,000s, I know I can't just necessarily put in a new patient for a $300 appointment, right? You want to kind of do that apples to apples. The end of the day, if that doesn't work, we want a full schedule. So you're going to put whatever you can in there, but you at least have a direction of what you're looking for first.
Gotcha. Interesting. Now, you mentioned squeaky wheel patients. How do
Yes.
you identify those early and set boundaries without damaging rapport?
So the other kind of taboo thing, I guess, to us is we are not contracted with any insurance companies. We are fee for service, believe it or not. So we don't double book. We are fee for service and we do not offer any in-house payment plans. So it all starts with the girls at the front, right? So if you have a patient that is very insurance driven, and it's not always, but they can tend to be more of your squeaky wheel. They don't want to pay anything out of pocket. They don't see the value in you and your practice. They just know life says I have to have my teeth clean and that's all I want to do, whatever my insurance is going to pay, and I want out the door, right?
Yeah.
That's great. There is somebody out there that will service them, and that might be a better fit for them. And we're very upfront and honest with them from that moment. So you can kind of start weeding some of those patients out there. Then it comes into how they present themselves in the office, right? Because you come in and you welcome them and, okay, we didn't get, maybe this paperwork or things like that. You start to feel it out. So then it's the communicating with the doctor of this patient's a little on edge. Maybe it's they're nervous to be here. We're going to find out. And then a lot of it comes out in our comprehensive exams, really the reality of the patient and their expectation. So it's very important, I think, for your provider to set their boundaries and how they treat a patient, right? I treat patients comprehensively. This is what our recommendation would be, X, Y, and Z, so that there is no gray zone. So they understand fully, like, you do have an hour prophy, right? Or you have this, so that they're not confused through that. That's where that starts to show up. Well, I only want what my insurance covers, or I don't want this, or I need payment plans. And again, then you start to realize, okay, this is going to be somebody we're going to have to put more time into. And that's not always a bad thing. And you can turn some of those around. But then when they get their first statement because insurance didn't pay everything and I don't want to pay that, or I was only in there for X amount of time. Why is it this much? You start to realize, okay, this may not be a fit for them. And you start coaching along those conversations. If we are treating comprehensively, we've had treatment plans with you. We've kind of discussed our philosophy and how our office operates. And if they continue, then someone needs to have that hard conversation of, look, we appreciate you thought of us. However, this doctor-patient relationship isn't successful for you nor the doctor. We will service you for 30 days for emergencies, but it may be best if you look for another option. And we would be happy to send any x-rays or any, documentation we have to your next provider. I think people get scared of that and they kind of do as the patient wants, even though the provider may not agree to it. And it puts the provider in a really tough place. And I would just really encourage your management team to be really close with your doctors and say to the doctors, it's okay. We don't have to service everyone. There are other offices out there for these reasons. Kind of stand your ground, stay true to what your doctor's philosophy is and your office culture.
I like that. I like the language and the tone behind that. Like letting them know, like, hey, it ain't for you kind of a thing. But you're like,
Yeah.
hey, 30 days, I'll still be here or anything like that. Have you ever seen them kind of like call back and say, you know what? Never mind. Okay, yeah, I'd still like to get this done. Sorry, I was having a bad day or anything like that.
I did. We had a gentleman who was raving about fees. We were too expensive. And he was giving us a budget of what we could work within. And he wanted the treatment he wanted within that budget. And we had to make it work. And I said, unfortunately, the project you're asking for is 3 times that. We also have to bring in a surgical office, and their fees are their fees. That is not even our entity. So unfortunately, there's nothing I can do with that. So he went on about his business. And 2 years later, he resurfaced, got the girls up front. He called and asked if I still was at the office. And I was. So they transferred him to me and he said, you were right. And I'm sorry. I went and I did something elsewhere, explained to me what he did. He said it was a really traumatic experience. I wish I would have just listened and been open-minded, because now I'm in a really tough space. Would you guys take me back as a patient? And we did. We had that conversation. I had another lady, she was scheduled to be a new patient. My doctor got sick. Unfortunately, she is human, right? So I had to reschedule, and she called me every name under the book, cursed up and down, very rude, hung up on me. I said, big notes on there, we will not be rescheduling this. A couple months down the road, the husband calls because he wants to reschedule for her. We had a very serious conversation of the only way. And he's like, I promise you won't act like that. And I will make sure. And so we kind of had an agreement that she can come to a new patient appointment if he was with her. And the minute she became rude or disrespectful to staff or the provider, we would no longer be seeing her. He very much understood. She came in, she was on her very best behavior, and she ended up being an okay patient. But sometimes they're upset, they're in pain, or whatever the case may be. They've spent thousands of dollars on their teeth and they don't want to hear the bad news. And so you have to be compassionate enough to that, right? And it's not an arguing match. It's just simply, that's our office philosophy. That's our office culture. It either fits for you or it doesn't. And it's okay if it doesn't. There's nothing wrong with that. And they come around. So stand your ground, keep your doctor's best interest at hand, because at the end of the day, even though it's a hard conversation, it's much easier than getting into anything legal because the patient's like, well, you did or you said, anything of that. So that's a big thing you want to try to avoid too.
Ashley keeps mentioning something that I don't want you to miss. None of this doctor driven schedule stuff works if your software is fighting you. If you're trying to protect your doctor's time, keep production healthy, and still spot openings for great patients, but you're doing it with a patchwork of paper, screenshots, sticky notes, old, worn out software, that's exhausting. This is where Dentrix Ascend changes the game. Ashley talked about living 2 weeks ahead in the schedule. That means knowing exactly which days are truly productive versus just full, which openings should be filled with crowns and which should be left for easier appointments, and which new patients actually have hygiene and treatment scheduled, and who still needs a follow up. In Dentrix Ascend, that's not guesswork. The Daily Huddle dashboard literally gives you the snapshot every morning: production for today, what you did yesterday, what's left to hit this month, unscheduled treatment, outstanding hygiene. It's all there in one place without anyone exporting a spreadsheet. And those ASAP lists Ashley mentioned, they're built in. You don't need a separate binder or Google Sheet. You just flag a patient as ASAP. And when a big case cancels, your team can instantly see who actually wants that time and plug them in. So if you're listening and thinking, we want this kind of calm, intentional schedule, but our software makes everything harder, not easier, it might be time to see what Dentrix Ascend can actually do behind the scenes. You can check it out at dentrixascend.com. That's dentrixascend.com, or use the specific link in the show notes below. It's going to be the first link in the show notes below. Even if you're not ready to switch yet, go look at how their daily huddle works and compare it to what you're doing now. The gap there will tell you a lot. All right, let's get back to Ashley and talk about how she uses her team to protect that schedule in real life. Interesting. Okay. So then how often, Ashley, does this happen where they get upset over insurance kind of a thing?
To be honest, we've done really well. So the girls that we have up front, we've encouraged them to explain that dental insurance is a coupon, right? I know everyone knows this lingo, but it will not pay for everything. It is there to help you along the way. We don't agree with it either. We will help you. We will utilize your benefits to the fullest, but we don't have a say in that. We are a third party. We bill as a courtesy for you. We will go to bat for you. If they're denying a claim and we don't feel that's right, we by all means will put your best interest at hand and we will go with that. We will never become in network with any insurance companies. We just don't agree with it. And if you're insurance driven or financially, we understand it's a really tough economy out there. So if every dollar counts, we don't take it personal. We totally understand, but you may be better suited at a PPO office for right now. And then we always say to them, like, we are here if you need us in the future, right? Because you don't ever want to close that door. I mean, they could get a new employer next month or, things like that. So you don't want to be rude and be like, well, that's all your insurance pays. I'm sorry, because you hear that sometimes they get snippy of that scenario. And it's like, that could be very temporary for them. Or maybe they're getting married and it will change through their spouse. There's all these life changes that happen. So I would encourage you to talk through it with them. A lot of the brokers or the HRs that put these people in plans, they don't explain it. So the patient doesn't understand. So we have an older client base and a lot of them are kind of looking at Medicare, Medicaid, supplemental plans. And I will say to them all the time, they start asking about plans. I'm like, listen, if you guys have something in writing, bring it in. We would be happy to look at it, tell you what our thoughts are on the plan, if it appears you would have coverage here, and then you can make an informed decision. So I think there's just a way to communicate with the patient. And the only reason their defense comes up is one, finances are a big thing for their family, which that's okay, right? The economy's hard. So you have to understand that. Or two, they're misinformed.
Yeah, and then they kind of feel like slightly embarrassed and they want to go
Right.
back.
Well, my insurance said 2 cleanings per year. Well, yes, but there's stipulations to that, right? And they don't ever explain those stipulations. So they get that defense because it's like you're trying to take from them or you're not going to honor their benefit. When again, we just remind them we're a third party. This is what the plan is. And I've had a patient that said to me, well, that's not what my insurance said. So her and I actually sat down and we called the insurance together on speakerphone and I asked the questions, we got the answers, and then she was like, I understand what you're saying. So again, sometimes it's just taking a little bit of time with some of those squeaky wheels and you can turn it around. But I also think it's how You deliver it. It's the lingo. It's getting your staff trained up on. We will do everything we can for you, but we are a third party. We don't have say over your plan, the contract, anything like that.
Interesting. I appreciate the scripts that you're providing. It's really, really beneficial. So, Dentrix Ascend, have they helped you maintain consistency in how your team communicates with patients across notes and appointments and things like that?
Yes. So the notes have been fantastic. There's two kind of versions of notes within their system. There's like a patient notes and then there's the clinical notes. So the clinical notes is just for anything that happens in an operatory, or if you're talking like if we're communicating with an office on implant parts, things like that. But the patient notes is anything that's communication with the patients, any financial discussions we've had, any insurance discussions, because we like to log those. So when the patient calls back the next month with the same question, we can say, okay, listen, I know we talked about it last month, but maybe it's the way we're wording it. Or sometimes one of the girls up front will say, like, listen, I talked to them last month. Can you talk to them? Something's not jiving here. They're not understanding what I'm saying. So then I can look back and see what they're saying about, the insurance or maybe the balance on the account or things like that. And it's all in one spot. The nice thing about the patient notes too is you can actually get a pop-up on your screen. So like if I open that patient's chart, I can elect where it pops up right there. And you can customize those alerts for each patient and each note, which makes it really nice. So if it's like something more important, you can put it on everything, where if that patient calls, you want those girls to see it right away and know the topic going on.
Gotcha. Interesting. So, going back to the topic of doctor-driven appointments,
Yeah.
you're kind of like the leader in making sure the schedule stays like this. So then what's one leadership principle you follow that helps your team stay emotionally balanced even on chaotic days?
Yeah. So I'm always 2 weeks ahead in our schedule, and I'm looking for multiple things, right? I'm looking that the procedure that's scheduled either has enough time, or if it has too much time, that I can take that back so we can have spaces for an emergency or anything like that. So I'm looking at that. I'm making sure there's treatment plans that are signed. Patients are prepared financially, all of those types of things. We look at the lab cases. Is there a lab case expected? Is it back? Where are we at? So staying 2 weeks out, I think, is key. Making notes in there. This way, if we have a question for a provider or, hey, somehow this patient didn't get a treatment plan, we have time to address those before they're in our chair and it becomes a wasted appointment. So that's key. And so there's notes on those appointments and things of that nature. The other thing is when we have openings, they kind of know like, okay, we do have that ASAP list. Dentrix Ascend makes it great. You can literally flag it ASAP. And so then you can take a look, and then you also can see broken appointments. So patients that have canceled for whatever reason. So it's a real quick, fast way, and it shows you the appointment in the color of what it is. So if it's a crown appointment, it's going to be that full length in that color. So you have a really good idea of what you're up against, making it easy to be like, hey, that's a 3-hour appointment. I have a 3-hour here. So just kind of keeping up on those things, keeping those lists cleaned up. So if they're like, I wanted you to call me if something sooner comes up, but you know what? I've changed my mind. Well, don't leave it hang out there. Get it off that list, right?
Mhm.
So it's just constant follow up on things like that, having that communication where I'll say to the girls, hey, who scheduled this? Something doesn't look right about it. Where did we come up with that? I don't foresee that this time is going to work. And then sometimes they'll say, oh, well, the doctor said she could sneak it in this time versus this time, or things like that. But it's just trying to catch it early and then having that dialogue with them of, where did this come from? Or catch this patient when they walk in. Can we call this patient? They need a pre-med. Do they have enough? So you just don't have those wasted times.
Interesting. ASAP list. What does that look like?
So a patient that'll call in, or maybe they're in the office and they need a crown. So with our prosthodontist, she schedules those, and actually our general too. They like 3 hours for crown preps. Again, we do not double book. Our assistants do not pack cord. They do not make temporaries. Our doctors make those in our in-house lab and things like that. So they are bigger appointments. So they tend to book out a little ways. So a lot of those patients like to be like, yeah, I'll come in sooner if I can. So we like to add them onto there. So when something last minute cancels or even 2 weeks out, we have a running list for each doctor of who wants in sooner. Those are your sure win bets because they've already said to you, hey, I'm willing to come in sooner versus kind of just randomly going in your schedule and being like, let's pick a name and see if it works. So that's where we always start. So mainly it's a lot of those bigger appointments. Sometimes it's new patients. Our new patients schedule a lot of ways. And of course, when they call to make that appointment, just like any patient, either they're nervous or they're worried. So they want in now, right? So if you're scheduling them out a month, again, our prosthodontist, she schedules out about 4 to 5 months. They're like, if anything comes up sooner, we'd be happy to get in. So a lot of them are those bigger appointments or new patients, but there are some other things in there too that could be just a standard filling or things like that.
Yeah. And so you put that into Ascend, and then Ascend just kind of pops it up, boom, a whole list, and then pick and choose
Yeah.
whichever the time slot.
Yeah. So when we schedule them in Ascend, they have an appointment a day and time. So you don't lose them. They're in your schedule for sure. And then they have a little box you can check within that appointment that says ASAP. And then it's great. Ascend does all the work from there. So when you're looking for those appointments, you just open up that ASAP list and it's just a running list for you. The key is if they're on there or even the broken, so patients that have to cancel appointments for any reason, you want to make sure you're pulling those appointments into your schedule and not creating a new appointment. Otherwise, that list becomes kind of null and void and it gets clogged up. So you just have to do your due diligence on it, but it makes life so much easier in the tracking of those patients so you don't lose anybody.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Now, you mentioned sometimes the doctor will say, maybe squeeze that person in, right? Or like, hey, yeah,
Yeah.
it's fine. You can see. How do you
Like,
prevent that from them slipping back? Always saying, like, just squeeze them in, kind of a thing.
we've actually had to have quite a few talks on this. So I try to remind her that, yes, she's a provider. So our specialist, she definitely gets a little more of that provider guilt of like,
Hmm.
I need to see them and things of that nature, which I totally get. That's the whole reason they go to be providers, right? They like to care for people, they like to help solve a problem. But I like to remind her, like, at the end of the day, you're still a mom, you're still a wife. You do get the chance to be human. And as hard as that is, because you feel like you have a commitment to your business and to your patients, and you do, you work 5 days a week. We definitely have, options here and there's certain things I can see sneaking in. If it's a toothache or if it's, a true type of emergency. But if it's just that squeaky wheel patient that thinks the more they call and they complain, then they can get in, that doesn't get them in. So you really have to know what warrants that. Okay, I'm going to sneak that in because it's a legit reason to sneak it in versus I just want this patient to stop bugging my staff.
Interesting. I like that a lot. So that means that takes a lot of work from you, also your team, but from you, like letting the doctor know now it's time for me to like manage you, kind of a thing, like lead you a
Yes.
little bit.
And Dentrix Ascend is great for this too, because you can make these events. Some people reference them as a block or things like that. And you can assign to like certain users that one, they're able to make them, and two, they're able to delete them. So you could put that in there, right? Like doctor is done at 4 o'clock on Wednesdays, and you could have that block in there. And unless they have the privileges to their user account in Dentrix Ascend, they can't take that block out of there. So it's like we call them no zones. So the no zone has to be approved by the provider or myself. And then the joke is always really by me because the providers are always going to tell you, yeah, I'll help that patient. So usually the girls will come to me and say, hey, this patient really like wants in or this, where should I put them? Let me know and I'll call them. And then it's looking into it. Like, who is the patient? What is their reasoning that they need to be squeezed in, right? And then if it is something true of that nature, then I can present it to the doctor and say, listen, this is one we really probably should sneak in, or what are your thoughts on sneaking this one in? And then we'll either look at the schedule together or I'll say like, hey, I'm looking at this day. Are you able to stay later, come a few minutes early, that kind of thing. Dentrix Ascend, you can do that too. You can kind of lock some scheduling down if you want to be real adamant on who can allow those.
Yeah. Cause then if that's the case, then anybody will just like, right, like the scheduler, office manager, assistant
Yeah,
will be like, let's just squeeze them in, kind of a thing.
right there. We're going to put them right there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. I like that. I didn't know that they do that. So, what's one thing you've learned about leading humans, not just managing schedules?
Yeah. So you have to remember they all have different personalities. They all have different home lives, right? So the way you may talk to one staff member or handle that staff is going to be different than the next. Same with your patients. So how you handle this patient is going to be definitely different than this one. Some patients are very straight to the point. They want to know the answer. They want, give them the money, give them the bottom line, get all my appointments. I'm going to do it. And then the next patient needs that, like, so what did you do this weekend and how are your kids? And oh my gosh, that's so great. Show me the pictures, right? And they pull up their phone. So you just have to be a good read of a character, I would say, and just understand it. It's not across the board. So one patient, you may not talk at all in the appointment. They want no communication, even if it's you and the doctor talking as the assistant. Where the next patient, they're trying to talk to you with their mouth open, right? And instruments in there. So you just have to learn to read the crowd and just kind of understand, even staff to staff for the assistant to the doctor, right? Like learn to read your provider. What are they needing? How can I help? What's their struggle today? Are they having a struggle today? That kind of thing just to help out. And I think that goes a long way with the patients, making them again feel like you care. So in our patient notes too, we put little notes in there. If patient moved from Texas and, or whatever the scenario is, patients granddaughter brings her to appointments or son's getting married in September, wants new dentures, and then when they come in and you ask them about those things, like, hey, any more wedding planning? What's going on? You would be shocked how excited these people get just because
Yeah.
they're like, I can't believe you remembered that. And it's a real simple thing. You put it in the note. And of course, you audit your charts. So you kind of just have it there, jot yourself a note. But to them, it's a big deal because they feel like you're still that private practice. You are still listening and care about them as a person.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I like that a lot. So then, how do you use technology like Ascend to humanize your office to make sure it supports connection instead of replacing it?
We, of course, like to do, the reviews and things like that to get that out there, get our feedback from our patients. But we like to take pictures. So then every patient's picture's there. So even if it's a patient we call them like super clean patients, right? They're seen every 6 months. They never have any cavities. They're like that A+ hygiene patient. Sometimes you don't remember their face because you just don't see them often. So you have that picture there. And when they come in, it's like, oh my gosh, hey, Sally, how have you been? They light up because you have a picture here. Like I may have not remembered when she walked through the door that was really Sally, but the picture in her Dentrix Ascend account tells me that's who that is, right? They look alike. We make those patient notes in there. There's a place in there you can put related patients. So even if they're not related to you, so we have a couple patients that are special needs and are in like an adult daycare home type of thing. So within their things, we have their caretaker's name and their phone numbers, even though we don't see them as patients. And then we also have like mom and dad. So no matter who brings her, you can have that communication of like, oh, hey, Becky, I'm so glad you could bring her in today. And again, it's just that like, oh my gosh, they actually know who we are.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Interesting. So then, how do you measure that? How do you measure something intangible, like the feeling of calm or confidence or presence in your practice, and make it part of your success metrics?
Yeah, I would say some of that you can measure within your reviews, right? The reviews patients are going to leave you and the words that they say, not just necessarily like a 5-star, but when they say like they're warm and welcoming or they always take such great care of me or, those speak volumes because that's very sweet. It sounds silly, but like Christmas cards, right? You wouldn't believe how many you get from patients and they're like, we consider you family and things like that. So it's like, not something you can necessarily track in a report, but you just see it coming back. We are in a small community. So, like the Walmart and the grocery store, you see patients, they want to stop and talk to you, right? They're like, how have you been? And you ask them, the kids, or you're doing this. And so when you catch them outside of even the element that you're used to seeing them, they want to have that rapport with you. And I think it means that the comfort level has come in because, in all honesty, the dental office isn't everybody's favorite, right?
Mhm.
A lot of people have fears of it and things of that nature. So I think you kind of start seeing it with those reviews and the communications within the community. And then when you're looking at reports, you start to see your production go up right at the end of the day because now they're referring friends or they believe in you and they trust in you that when you tell them that number 30 needs a DO, it's like, well, you're not just trying to get my money. You truly mean I need this filling and they're scheduling it. So your unscheduled treatment goes down. your production goes up. So you start to see the flip in all of those things that you can track those, but the intangible, I think, is more so just those Google reviews, the community presence, that type of thing.
Yeah, like the buzz around you is kind of getting
Yeah.
more positive, and more people are talking about it. I
Yeah.
like that a lot. Okay. So then last question, Ashley, if
Hmm.
we wanted to implement this, we're listening to this, doctors listening to this, office managers are listening, and they're like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to implement a doctor-driven schedule. What
Yeah.
are the first steps that we need to do right now to see this needle move within the first week, 2 weeks?
I think you have to have a plan. So you need to sit down with each of the providers and you need to be realistic about the time they need. So if they need a 2 hour time slot for a certain procedure, don't shortchange them and give them an hour and a half. Like you have to be very open and upfront with each other. And then you also have to know before going into it those numbers. What does it take to run each operatory per hour? And that includes all of your overhead, right? You need the lights, you need your salary, you need the front desk salary, all of those things. So you got to kind of do some pre work to it to get that going. And then the next thing I would say is when you launch it and you go, as hard as it's going to be when a patient says to you, well, that doesn't work for me. I want you to crown prep in the afternoon when I get off work at 3 o'clock. You have to have that lingo and understand we hold our ground. That's not when doctor does these, unfortunately. We only do these in the morning. I can find my next day and time, but it will still be a morning appointment. And just start coaching those patients along of kind of how that transition is going to happen and just communicate with them, right? We want to give you the best care. This is when doctors at their best. There's nothing wrong with that. People understand that 2 o'clock slump is real, that they might get it too at work. I mean, I don't want somebody doing a crown prep on me if that's not their peak time, right? And so just kind of be open with them and show that you truly care. And then it will start to flow from there. So once you have that plan, you have those schedule templates, follow them to a T. It's going to be rough, but you just coach the patients along. And before you know it, nobody's even going to question it. It's going to run like an oil work.
I love that. Hey, 2 p.m. slump, right? And then
Yes.
you're just
Yeah,
like, hey, doctor's at their best at this time. And it kind of like lets you know, like, well, I do want the best. I do want
I
her at
do.
the best.
And I deserve the best, right? Like you want the best. We want the best for you. This is how we're going to do that.
Yeah. Awesome, Ashley. Thank you so much for being with us. But before we say goodbye, if
Of
anyone
course.
has questions, concerns, or anything like that, where can they find you?
Yeah. So social media on Instagram or Facebook, Ashley Whinery. Or I will also put my email below and feel free to reach out and ask any questions or any way I can help.
Awesome. So that's going to be in the show notes below. So definitely reach out to Ashley, especially if you're looking to implement this pretty soon or in the future. But awesome, Ashley. Thank you so much for being with us, and we'll hear from you soon.
Thank you. Have a great day.
I love where Ashley landed. At the end of the day, your schedule is really about how humans feel in your practice, your patients, and your team. Doctor, clear boundaries, patients who feel known, and a front desk that isn't bracing for the next fire. You can't create that environment on top of chaos and guesswork. And you definitely cannot create it on software that forces your team to remember everything in their heads. That's why I wanted to highlight Dentrix Ascend in this conversation. It's not just another practice management system, it's built to support exactly the kind of philosophy Ashley described. Patient notes and alerts front and center, so your team remembers the wedding, the special needs caregiver, the insurance conversations, and can pick up the relationship where they left off. Also, ASAP and broken appointment lists that actually work. So filling a hole in the schedule doesn't mean randomly dialing down the alphabet. And cloud-based access. So whether you're in the office, at home, or checking tomorrow's day from the car, you have the same real-time picture your team does. And here's the curiosity piece I'd invite you to lean into. If you opened your software right now, could you answer in under 60 seconds these questions? Who are my best unscheduled treatment opportunities this week? Which new patients never booked hygiene? And are we actually on track for this month's goal, or are we just busy? If the honest answer is no, not without digging, then your software is quietly taxing your brain and your team every single day. So here's your next tiny step. Go to dentrixascend.com. That's dentrixascend.com, or you can go in the show notes below and click on the first link in the show notes below, and it'll take you to that website. And take a look at how Ascend handles the daily huddle, how they handle scheduling, notes, and real-time reporting. Imagine Ashley's system, doctor-driven days, protected time, calm front desk, with software that actually supports them instead of getting in the way. If your goal is to protect your doctor's energy and build a practice that feels sane and sustainable, your schedule and your software have to be on the same team. So Dentrix Ascend is worth a serious look. So go in the show notes below, click on the first link in the show notes below, and check it out. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I really appreciate you, and I can't wait to talk to you in the next episode.